Hey there, this is Manisha. My guest today is Manish Gupta, co founder and CEO of Indegene, a company specializing in research, content, and data solutions to the pharma industry globally, leveraging analytics and AI. Manish has an engineering degree from ITBHU and MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. He is the recipient of the Distinguished Alumnus of ITBHU and Young Alumni Award for Entrepreneurship from IIM Ahmedabad. While researching this episode, I was reminded of pre placement talks 2 decades ago on Excel Campus. Companies of various shapes and sizes used to send their best and most eloquent managers to woo management graduates, and very often, our decision making was based on the brand, compensation offered, freebies or swag as it is called today, and how impressive those managers were. Because, in the absence of Glassdoor or any other such apps, the only way to know what the culture was like was to extrapolate it based on how the managers conducted themselves and their BS meter. The lower the BS, the higher the points. I know I made the decision to join my first company, GlaxoSmithKline, based on its culture. Having seen the food and pharma industry closely, I was keen to understand how Manish built his company and what his playbook looked like. Today's conversation with Manish is as low as it gets on the BS meter. Precise and candid. This is truly Tell It Like It Is. Right off the bat, I asked Manish what he would say to a new hire.
Welcome to Indegene, and you're going to have a ride of your life over here.
The life sciences industry has been at the top of global attention in the search for a vaccine for COVID-19. Naturally, things are hectic, and so how has life altered for you and everyone at Indegene?
So the last 6 months or so since COVID started has been, I would say, interesting and intense for us at Indegene. And before I go into how life changed, how it altered, just a very quick overview of who we are in the first place, right? So we are a healthcare solutions firm that works with life science organizations, and our promise to life science organizations across the world that we help them build capabilities, organizations on the medical and commercial side to help them bring products to the market more efficiently and more effectively. So that's a broad promise. And if I take it one level below to explain what this really means, is pharma companies spend a lot of money in sales and marketing to reach out to doctors, patients. How do you do that more effectively, efficiently? That's one thing which we help companies do using digital and AI. The second thing is these companies spend a lot of, again, time, energy, money on various regulatory processes, a lot of medical processes. We enable them to do that more effectively using medical capabilities and AI. We have close to 3,000 people now spread over offices in India, US, in multiple places, Canada, big 5 European countries, China, Japan, Southeast Asia, right? So a bunch of countries across the world. Now, I spoke about 3,000 people. Out of this 3,000, I would say around 500 or 600, I don't remember the exact number, would have joined in the last 6 months, right? So they would have joined the company when we were, all of us across the world were working remote, driven by the increased demand for digital offerings across the world by life science organizations. So you could imagine, right? Hiring these people, bring them on board, making them proactive from day one. So a lot of my colleagues have been busy in making this happen. And while we do that, we really cherish our, I would say, unique culture, right? So how do we really bring people into the fold from the culture perspective? How do we really get them to experience being an Indegene, right? That's been one thing which everybody's been grappling with. As far as change is concerned, one thing which I clearly see, I wouldn't say change, but getting reinforced in a fairly significant way when I talk to my colleagues and not necessarily direct reports, but people, many more people outside, there are two things which have happened. One is that everybody feels vindicted that, whatever what we did, path we were in is the right path, right? Because when you hear about layoffs, salary freezes across the board in industries, that's a time when we are hiring people. We had our salary raises, we had bonuses. We actually announced something called gratitude bonus for the entire company for having shifted to work from home and went through the whole pain and operations not getting disrupted. Right? So in that, and obviously the increased demand for services. So people feel very happy about that, right? Being in a company which is truly relevant as time changes. And along with that, I think all of us, including me, feel very proud to be associated with the life science industry which the world looks at right now. Those are things which have really got reinforced, enhanced, if you would.
Indeed, it's a vindication of what you started way back. Let's back up. And start at the very beginning. You co founded Indegene a few months after graduating from IMA. Did you always know what you were going to build? What was the vision then? Who were your partners in the journey?
So the vision, as you would expect from people who are 26, 27, was to change the world. And so in our case, it was change healthcare, bring healthcare expertise and technology expertise to solve various problems, right? We redefine how healthcare information, data flows in the whole healthcare system. The first thing which we said we're going to do is make healthcare information and data available to practicing physicians when they need it and where they need it. And pharma was supposed to be the place where we monetize it, make it useful for the pharma industry, all this network, and pharma could benefit from it, or obviously it becomes a paying customer for this network also. That was supposed to be phase one of our program. Then there were a bunch of other things which we had rolled out as part of phase two, phase three, as we were going to change the world. But as we were making these plans, executing on them, as Mike Tyson once famously said, right, everybody has plans till you get punched in the face. Same thing happened with us. We had the dotcom bust and a lot of things happened at our time. So we obviously had to make a lot of changes way back in 2000. My partners that point of time and who remain my partners, very fortunately, were four more people. One was a colleague of mine from Ahmedabad itself, 1 year senior to me in Ahmedabad, Dr. Rajesh Nair. There was two more people who joined us from the pharma industry, Anand and Gaurav, and a fifth person called Dr. Sanjay Parekh, who was a venture manager from the first VC firm who invested in us, right? And he jumped on our side. We still debate whether there's a brighter side or a darker side, but he joined Indegene as a founding member. So all of us still there in the company.
Okay, you're making this sound very easy. Tell me more. For a company that flew straight into the dot-com headwinds, how did you survive? Did you have to pivot?
We started off like any company with a lot of enthusiasm, energy, right? And did a lot of big things, started investing. We raised a small amount of capital from a VC firm. This I'm talking about early 2000s, so you can imagine, right? We were very happy by raising 2 crore rupees that time. Just to give you a sense of the change which happened when we were doing this raise, we were also parallelly talking to another VC whom we didn't want to talk to. But this VC called me and my colleague Rajesh for lunch in a place called Taj West End in Bangalore. And he wanted to give us twice the valuation, twice the capital. But we had already agreed with another VC and committed to another VC. This person really got frustrated and said, and he was a couple of decades elder to us. He told me and Rajesh, मैं बोल रहा हूँ uncle से पैसे ले लो, right? And he got really aggressive on that. So on one hand, you had that. In another 12 months or so, you had this VC, our VC from whom we raised money, and pretty much everyone else wiped out because the dot-com bust had happened. And most of the VCs had packed up. It was very, very dark period, right? For any small company which was thinking about raising money. And from our perspective, as I said, we had big plans investing in technology. We had run out for most of the money which we had raised. And the writing was very clear on the wall that either we pack or we, as you said, pivot, right? In that case, in that time, we decided to obviously pivot. Now, luckily what we had done is that whatever we had built, we anyway had plans to monetize that, right? We had to pull that forward by probably a year or two. And in a time when we didn't have money, right, at all. So we used whatever capabilities we had and to build a business on pharma marketing with Indian pharma companies. When I say Indian pharma companies, these are could be MNCs, but based out of India, right? Because we didn't even have the resources to explore global markets. We did that. It was a tough ride, fun ride also. We grew rapidly every year. In fact, I still remember the numbers, right, from those periods. We grew 25 lakhs to 2.2 crores, to 4.47 crores, and to 7 crores, right? But we always were under cash flow pressures in the first few years. So all of us as founders didn't take salaries for 2 years, always pressures on cash flows. Nevertheless, we were still investing and growing, and a lot of pain. Some people left us, all that kind of stuff happened. But by 2004, I think we had established ourselves in a reasonable way, at least in the Indian market. While they were probably the toughest days, those are the days which at least all the early people have fondest memories and remembrances of.
Looking back, what was the breakthrough for Indegene? Describe the moment when it all came together.
Two of them. And probably the third one, the jury is still out, might be this one. COVID might be one of those inflection points for us. But as I said, the jury is still out. So let me stay with the first and second. The first one was in 2004-05, we got a new investor into the company. This was a family office of a person called N.S. Raghavan, who was one of the founders of Infosys, one of the largest shareholders. And given that he was the eldest member in the founding team of Infosys, he had retired in 2000. He got very interested, invested in the company, bought out the other shareholders, invested some more direct capital into the company. And that gave us capital to really start exploring global markets. And from a company which was somehow making ends meet, growing the Indian market between 2005 to 8, right? We became a company where a lot of our revenues, at least 50% of our revenues started coming from global markets. Today is 95%. Right? So we made that pivot in a fairly significant way. And that was one clear inflection point. The other one, which was again very interesting, was somewhere in the around 2010 period, when the pharma industry went through a very significant change. The pharma industry went through something called patent cliff. A lot of the patents, close to $200 billion worth of pharma patents, expired between 2009 to 12, somewhere in that period, which essentially meant the industry lost almost 90% of these revenue. 200 billion, so think about it, $180 billion disappearing, and you don't have that filling, at least in a hurry. So pharma industry really had to very drastically change many of their operating model beliefs and how they did things. And that was a tremendous opportunity for us. So we grew very significantly since 2010 or so.
The food and pharma industry is heavily regulated by the FDA, and while the neighborhood pani puri wala can get away with packing puris in a thin polythene bag and charging any price he wishes, food companies and drug companies have entire teams comprising legal and R&D folks who provide input to marketing teams on what claims can be made and how marketing collateral can be developed.
So pharma industry in general is very regulated across the board. So think about it when you're doing your first, and now I think the general awareness of the pharma industry, given the vaccine, is probably just shot up so many notches above. So your drug is going through clinical trials. At that point of time, you have to do tons of filings with FDA. Everything is getting filed. FDA is looking at the data, which it might be doing with the vaccine also right now. And based on that, a drug gets approved or not approved, moves from one phase to the other. Once a product hits the market, at that point in time, any safety event which is happening needs to get reported, right? And there's a process around that which gets very complex. Even the small thing of a label of a drug, which probably most of us as patients or consumers don't even read, that's a highly regulated thing. What you can say, what you cannot say, how that needs to change if there is a safety event or a change in regulation at a global level or in probably 1,800 countries which you're operating in, right? So it's a very, very regulated industry. Now, when it comes to sales and marketing, there are, unlike other industries where you could make any claim, or at least most of the claims. In pharma industry, you're going to be very careful of what claims you can make, right? What you can say, what you cannot say. There are very strict FDA guidelines around that. And even from an internal pharma company perspective, their internal processes, let's say marketing develops some material, they just can't put it out. They have to route it through what is called a legal review process. Medical experts and legal experts review it and say, can we make this claim? Can we not? Or we can't make this claim. Once that is done, then only you can roll out your product into the market. So that becomes a challenge for the pharma industry. That's one nuance in this industry. The other big nuance in this industry from a sales and marketing perspective is that unlike other industries where your consumer durables or FMCG, where you experience a product and that drives adoption, buying, right? You buy a car, you immediately get a sense of that, how you have a customer experience. You buy any FMCG product, you get experience. When you're buying a pharma product, your experience might actually happen 3 years down the line, 1 year down the line. To that extent, you really never sell a product. What you sell is content. You sell clinical content based on which a doctor makes a recommendation or regulator makes a description. So the buying is much more complex than other industries. Now, what does all this mean from a consumer perspective or a patient perspective? It takes almost 8 to 10 years to do clinical trials. It costs a couple of $1 billion to bring a new product to the market, right? And that's pretty humongous time and cost. Given that it's a complex marketing with all these processes I spoke about, it takes pharma companies end up spending 20-25% of their revenues on sales and marketing, which is again pretty large. The whole paradigm around digital AI offers opportunities to rationalize processes, do things differently, and think about bringing these life-saving drugs to the market instead of 10 years to the patient in 7 years or 6 years, right? Reducing the sales and marketing cost of drugs so that you can make, on one hand, drugs cheaper, and in many cases, drugs which could not have been launched because of the commercial model required, right? And they could not even been bought to the market. You can bring those products to the market and benefit patients. Right? And that's the opportunity we are seeing and companies are grappling with right now of how we're using digital and AI to make this happen in this highly regulated industry.
Naturally, pharma lends itself to the use of AI and digital capabilities since vast data sets across all stages of product development are available. You can see the genius of such an opportunity.
Let's take the case of sales and marketing, where we are working with pharma companies and saying using digital, we could drive sales and marketing using digital much more effectively, right, than what you're doing with the field, right? And we can bend your prescription curve. In something like that, we would use products which we have developed internally, right, to finally deliver this outcome. We're not selling the product per se, but we are selling a solution in which we use some of these products. And these products are a combination of a bunch of things. One is that we have a database of physicians, their preferences, what we call digital affinity, something which we continue to build on. We learn on the marketplace. We have our own analytics model algorithms, figure out the shortest path to prescription, as we call it, from a digital perspective, right, based on these data sets we have created. We have a very different and unique way of segmenting physicians in the first place, right? So we have things like that which are going on. On the medical side of things, we have a technology which is called intelligent content authoring, in which we break content into small components and store them in a very different way, right? Indication, side effects. I'm just making it simple right now in different ways. And we store these as what we call atoms. And depending on the use, we assemble these atoms, right, based on a set of rules very quickly, right? Rather than rewriting these documents every time you need a slightly different element, right? So that's a AI-based technique which we have developed internally. So these are just some examples, but we have bunch of tools like this which enable things to be done differently.
Manish, what advice do you have for startup founders?
Spend more time on markets. Don't just get opportunistic in seeing that one time opportunity and trying to extrapolate that into how a market will behave. That's what I see entrepreneurs making mistakes. I always get reminded of this lecture we had in IIM Ahmedabad, part of our marketing course. Very quickly, we will map the market on a x-axis, y-axis, on one attribute on x-axis, another one on y, and say, here is an empty space, we can launch a product over here or start a company over here. And this prof of ours would ask, how do you know there is ground over there? It's not a sink. And I just wish we would have internalized that very strongly. And most of the entrepreneurs, unfortunately, don't internalize that. So I would say that's the most important thing.
Listening to Manish's story of building the company, I'm reminded of the kid in the candy store who's having such a good time that he just lost track of time and never felt the need to do anything else or be distracted by other things. So I asked him what the journey has meant for him personally and if there is an end game planned.
That's a tough one. I'm going to answer this two ways. One is I grew up in Lucknow, studied in Varanasi. So let me just try to do it in terms of tone. I'm going to use a share by Javed Akhtar. It's a long one, so I'm going to just use the first line. Any of your listeners don't understand Hindi, or actually it's more Hindi, so that's going to be a tough one. So it's the first line is मेरी जिंदगी मेरी मंजिलें, मेरी जिंदगी मेरी मंजिलें, मुझे कुर्ब में नहीं दूर दे. Kurb means near. मेरी जिंदगी मेरी मंजिलें मुझे कुर्ब में नहीं दूर दे, मुझे दिखा तू रास्ता वही रास्ता जो सफर के बाद गुरूर दे. Gurur means pride, right? I think our journey in so now let me shift to the corporate answer for this, right? The journey
no,
in
first translated. First translated.
So you're asking your life that don't give me my destinations or goals don't make them close, right? मेरी जिंदगी मेरी मंजिलें मुझे कुर्ब में नहीं दूर दे. दूर means far. Give me them far. Let them be far off. Show me the path, right? मुझे दिखा तू वही रास्ता जो सफर के बाद गुरूर दे. Show me a path or journey which at the end of which you feel very proud. Yeah, so that was a Lucknow Varanasi answer to it. Now, if I shift to the Bangalore or Ahmedabad answer, what I have got my kicks at Indegene in is building institution, teams, processes, right, which could scale and last for their own. And I think that's been a really pleasurable journey for me. My first objective or end game would be obviously to make sure that Indegene gets to a stage where it's recognized as a global institution, right? I think we have some way to go over there. And after that, I would want to use this inclination of mine, strength of mine, whatever you want to call it, right, to contribute in a slightly different and bigger way, get involved in social causes, where you're helping build institutions on that front. What those institutions are, I still have to figure that out. There have been lots of ups and downs. And as an entrepreneur, having built the company, I told you about not taking salaries, having all these difficult moments. So there have been that sinking feeling so many times. But all in all, it's been a really tremendous journey. I won't trade it for anything else in life. In spite of all the tough times, I made some of the best friends at work. All my co-founders are like extended family, and not only co-founders. Actually, all my so many people at work are very, very close friends. Outside of work, I would not hang around with them. That's been a great thing. I had the opportunity to be part of building what I would call, at least on the path to building, creating an institution. And that's an opportunity which few are fortunate to have. I also always found the time to spend time with family, friends, and those are things which really matter to a person like me. There have been some trade-offs. Obviously, as happens with entrepreneurship, there is deferred gratification, which means that you couldn't buy that big car or big house your colleague might have bought 10 years back, but those things really never mattered. So to that extent, I think for me, it's been just outstanding, amazing journey.
Clarity of purpose, outsized ambition, precision, and an easy vibe. That's what I got from talking to Manish. And I worked with a lot of business managers. This stuff is hard to come by. I could get behind something like this. If you're interested in the life sciences industry and get your kicks from applying tech solutions to solve for problems, check Indegene out. They're hiring. That's it from me. Do share the episode freely with your friends and foes. And yes, do subscribe on the app of your choice: Apple, Google, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Cast, or good old YouTube. You can send me feedback on LinkedIn or by leaving a voice note. I'll be back next week with the season finale and an unusual story of purpose, performance, and reward. Until then, stay well.